Chancellor, Vice Chancellor, Deputy Vice Chancellor, senior academic staff, other members of the faculty, the graduands, their families and well-wishers. Let me first say that it's a tremendous privilege to be here at this convocation ceremony of the Open University. I think convocations are very special occasions. It reflects the fact that each of the graduands has completed a journey in gaining more knowledge, more expertise, which will enable them to perform more effectively and at a higher level in their respective careers going forward. So it is a special day, as I said, for each of you graduates and your families. Also, I think it's important to recognize the very special role played by the Open University in the tertiary education landscape of the country. It provides education opportunities, I believe, for over 40,000 students. I think through open and distance learning, it is giving enhanced opportunities for all of you as well as your fellow students. I think in today's world, when change is accelerating at an exponential rate, the premium attached to continuous education, that is the premium attached to constantly being open to enhancing one's skill base, becomes even more important. It is said that we're living in the midst of the fourth industrial revolution, that our lives, the way our lives are organized, the way our work is organized, the way in which our societies are organized, is going to change dramatically in the next 10, 20 years. And this is not just about technology. Yes, technological change is driving a lot of the evolution that is taking place, but I think all the disciplines would need to be constantly reviewing how they are responding to this rapidly changing world that we're living in. As I said, it's going to mean that we're going to live in a different way. We're going to work in a different way. So all disciplines, not just the sciences and technology, but all disciplines would need to work out how best we cope with these very fast. And I think in the next 10 years, we'll probably have more change than we've had in the last 50 years. So that is what we need to cope with, and I think all our disciplines need to respond to that. And the spirit that all of you have shown to keep acquiring more qualifications, more accreditation, I think is what needs to be reflected in all of us as we go forward. Before I get on to the main theme of my remarks, remarks which are more appropriate for a convocation, given my position, I always take the opportunity of having a captive audience to say something about the economy. Because I feel that sometimes we haven't fully understood where we are as an economy. By no stretch of the imagination can we say that we have a thriving and flourishing economy. We do not have a thriving and flourishing economy. However, at the same time, I do feel there's a lot more doom and gloom around than is necessary. I say that because the basic fundamentals of the economy are in reasonable shape. I'll try to justify that statement as I go forward. And also, there's enormous potential. This country has enormous potential. If we can get our act together, there is literally no limit as far as the country is concerned. We have a wonderful location. We are 20 miles from the fastest growing large economy, that is India. And in the past, that proximity wasn't that useful because both countries had very poor infrastructure. So we could not leverage the benefits of good close proximity. Now, the infrastructure in both countries is getting better. So the opportunities for leveraging that proximity is going to increase more and more. In addition, we are smack bang in the middle of China's One Belt, One Road initiative. And already we've seen the benefits of that location. In addition, we're close to ASEAN. We are close to the Middle East. We have access to East Asia. We are equidistant between Europe and the Far East. It's a wonderful location. For millennia, we were a hub in the middle of the Indian Ocean. We need to rediscover those routes whereby we open up and are able to take advantage of this wonderful location that we have and all the other assets that I have just spoken about. And this potential is reflected in something that happened just a couple of days ago. On Monday, on behalf of the government of Sri Lanka, the central bank issued an international sovereign bond denominated in dollars. We were hoping to get $2 billion US dollars. We were hoping to raise $2 billion US dollars. In fact, it was oversubscribed 3 times, and $6.2 billion worth of subscriptions came in during the course of Monday. And we had 2 tranches, a 5-year tranche where we wanted 500 million, and a 10-year tranche, a 10-plus year tranche where we wanted 1.5 billion. The 10-year tranche was in fact oversubscribed more. There were about $4 billion worth of subscriptions for the 10-year tranche of 1 billion. So people have a great deal of confidence in the long-term prospects of this country. The fact that people were willing to take on 10-year money. They were lending us money for 10 years. So that, I think, gives significant credence to the fact that this country does have enormous potential. And all of you who are going out into the world, I mean, some of you are already out in the world, but now you have more skills, more expertise. We need to make sure that this potential is materialized and turned into the reality on the ground for the people of this country. Another point I'd like to make in terms of having confidence, I'm talking about the long term. Now, in terms of the short term, why did I say that the fundamentals are in reasonable shape? One thing, again, which gives credence to that is the fact that on the 13th of May, the executive board of the IMF approved the 5th review of the extended fund facility that the government of Sri Lanka has with the IMF. Now, the IMF would not have approved that review if the country's macroeconomic fundamentals were not in reasonable shape. Again, I'm not saying we have wonderful fundamentals, but the fundamentals are in reasonable shape. And that was why the IMF's executive board was willing to approve that review. To give, again, justification for that, our inflation target is 4 to 6%. At the moment, the headline inflation rate is 5. It's within that target. In addition, in terms of the reserves of the country, at present it's about 6.9 billion US dollars, which is 4 months worth of import cover. Again, not wonderful, but certainly perfectly adequate. And if you look at the one area where we are lagging is the growth rate. Last year, the growth rate was 3.2%. This year, the central bank initially projected 4%. But with the events, the very unfortunate events of April of this year, that we have revised that growth rate down to 3%. But again, this is an extraordinarily resilient country. We have shown that again and again. And I'm sure we can bounce back, because if you look around, the productive capacity of the economy, vast swathes of our productive capacity, whether it's agriculture, whether it's manufacturing installation. There was one manufacturing installation, the pasta factory, that was affected, I think, near Putnam. But other than that, the manufacturing installations are all intact. Some retail outlets were affected, certainly. But the vast swathe of the productive capacity of the economy is very much intact. So what we need is confidence. The sentiment and confidence need to return, and we need to be confident in the future prospects of this country. The security forces have done a wonderful job in stabilizing the situation, and hopefully we're not going to have these kind of events again. And because these events were really perpetrated by a small group of people who didn't even have or don't even have the support of their wider community, their own wider community. So I think this has enabled the security forces to contain the situation very quickly, and going forward, hopefully we won't have any such instances. And this should give us the confidence really to press on and to really work towards realizing, as I said, this great potential this country has. Sometimes I think foreigners have greater faith in our potential than we ourselves do. When you look at the fact that they were willing to lend money much more than we anticipated for 10 years. And so we need to be more confident in our future. We need to take advantage of the opportunities that we have. So with that, let me now turn to the subject at hand and share with you some reflections on tertiary education. And here I must also express my gratitude to my colleagues in the central bank who have given me some very useful notes to share with you. Education has been perceived as an important determinant of economic growth and social well-being. It is multifaceted. It is an investment in people. It is a basic service. It is known as a merit good and a source of human capital. In this context, education, and more specifically higher education, can play a pivotal role in accelerating economic progress. Higher education contributes to increasing the output of the economy by increasing labor productivity, innovative capacity, and diffusion and transmission of knowledge and technology. At the individual level, higher education raises the cognitive skills of a person, which in turn increases his or her employability and income-earning capacity. Higher education also promotes entrepreneurial skills of people, as well as their adaptability to use new technology. Recent research conducted at the London School of Economics, using data from 15,000 universities across 78 countries, shows that by doubling the number of universities per capita, it can bring about an increase in future per capita GDP of over 4%. Research has also found that higher education had positive and significant effect on economic growth in Taiwan, which is one of the great success stories of the last 20, 30 years. An additional percent of the workforce with higher education is estimated to have increased real output by approximately 0.2% per year in Taiwan during the period 1965 to 2000, when they had their economic transformation. Other research carried out using data for 15 OECD and large non-OECD developing countries indicates that a 1% increase in the share of the workforce with a university degree raises long-run productivity by between 0.2 and 0.5%. Further, 20% of the United Kingdom's economic growth between 1982 and 2005 came as a direct result of increased skills accumulation. Education not only contributes to economic growth, but has a strong impact on reducing poverty and enhancing the general well-being of the population. As you all know, Sri Lanka is widely acclaimed for public welfare and for free education at primary and secondary levels. Education at public universities, technical colleges, and other vocational institutions is also either free or highly subsidized. Now, as far as primary and secondary education is concerned, while we have had extremely impressive enrollment ratios, sometimes our learning outcomes have not been as robust as they have not been as aligned to the needs of the country as they could have been. Now, as a result, comparable to some countries in the region, despite the relatively high levels of literacy, we have not been able to achieve the pace of economic development that those countries have had, particularly the countries to the east of us in Southeast Asia and East Asia. Countries such as South Korea, Singapore, and Malaysia that were similar to Sri Lanka in terms of economic development in the 1960s have progressed far more quickly since then. For instance, our per capita income in 2017 was $4,014. Malaysia, which was behind us in the 16, had a per capita income of 9,951, which is twice our per capita income. Singapore, which was roughly the same as ours in the 1960s, now has a per capita income of $57,000. That's more than 14 times our per capita income. South Korea, again, was behind us in the 1960s, now has a per capita income of $29,000. So these countries have forged ahead of us. Those are really the models that we need to look at. And in all those countries, human capital accumulation played a major, major role in driving their development process. Let me say a few words about the current situation in the university system in Sri Lanka. During 2018, there were 15 universities and 19 other higher education institutions under the purview of the University Grants Commission. Although 64.4% of the students who sat for the GCE examinations in 2018 were eligible for university admission, only 19.1% of those students actually achieved entry into universities. Now, if the comparable figures for other countries, that's the gross enrollment ratio. We had a gross enrollment ratio of 19%. India has 28%, Indonesia 36%, Malaysia 42%, Singapore 84%, and South Korea 94%. So 94% of the students who qualify for university education in Korea actually get admission into a university. So the demand for higher education has increased, particularly in the backdrop of rising income levels and increasing aspirations of both students and their parents. Now here, I think we need this is a purely personal opinion, we need to be, in my view, much more pragmatic in terms of the way we view provision of tertiary education. The government of Sri Lanka is fiscally constrained, severely fiscally constrained. That is no one government's fault. For years, our governments have not shown the discipline that the successful countries in Asia have done. As a result, we now are in a situation where the fiscal space, the government's capacity to spend, is severely restricted. We spend almost 100% of our revenue on debt servicing. That is the accumulated problem of many years, several governments, a lack of discipline. So in that kind of situation, you don't have the kind of fiscal space one would like to have for the state to be able to provide tertiary education for all those who deserve to have tertiary education. So I do feel in my own mind that we should be much more pragmatic in considering the mix of state, private, and mixed provision of tertiary education. Now, the state must have a very active role in terms of accreditation and quality assurance. That the state must play, as I said, a very central and important role. But given the constraints we have in terms of resources, my own view is we need to be pragmatic. The center of our attention in this discussion should be opportunities for our children, not ideology. So that's, I think, a thought I'd like to leave with all of you. I mean, this is a very personal view, and I think, as I said, we need to look at it in a very much a problem-solving way. We don't have the resources. Our children need tertiary education. How best can we meet their needs? The demand for higher education in Sri Lanka, given the very challenging landscape, the Open University plays an extremely important role. As I said at the beginning, given the rapid changes that we are experiencing, this facility, which provides the opportunity for people to have continuous learning, the opportunity to retrain, an opportunity to upgrade their skills, I think is extremely important in terms of educational landscape of the country. And I think the importance of open and distance university is only going to increase as people will be required, as I said, to constantly adapt to a very rapidly changing world. And facilities like the Open University that give people the opportunity to come through its open and distance learning systems would become even more important as we go forward. Various steps are being taken to improve and standardize the quality of university education in Sri Lanka. In this connection, the Accelerating Higher Education Expansion and Development Project was launched during 2018 by the Ministry of Higher Education in collaboration with the World Bank with the aim of increasing enrollment in priority disciplines, improving the quality of degree programs, and promoting research and innovativeness in higher education. Meanwhile, continuing activities of the Quality Assurance Council of the UGC is currently taking steps to strengthen the higher education sector through various initiatives. Initiatives have also been taken to establish a Quality Assurance and Accreditation Commission that would regulate all higher education institutions in the country. On research, we have not done as well as, again, the successful countries of East and Southeast Asia. According to the Sri Lanka Education Sector Assessment Report of the World Bank, Sri Lanka is ranked at the 138th position among 2007 countries in terms of the number of cited articles per 1 million inhabitants. Sri Lanka's rank is slightly lower than Pakistan and below countries like India, Thailand, and Malaysia. The number of patents submitted is often used to demonstrate the innovativeness of research findings and how research findings are brought to the outside world. Again, the Sri Lanka Education Sector Assessment Report that I referred to earlier shows that Sri Lanka is ranked at 85th place out of 160 countries based on per capita number of patents. Therefore, there is ground for policymakers as well as academics to strengthen and nurture a research culture within our university system with the aim of fostering innovative thinking. And as I said, in this rapidly changing world, this is going to become, again, more and more important. Further, close collaboration of the universities with the employers and industry is also essential to align the syllabuses of the universities and to ensure that there is real-world applicability of the research and also in terms of promoting the employability of students. I think the ideal what one is trying to achieve is to have our education, training, and skills development system well aligned with the requirements of the labor market, which in turn should take into account the sectors with dynamic comparative advantage in the economy. So what I'm saying is, if you work backwards, what are the sectors which are growing fastest? What are the sectors which are going to have significant potential in the future? Then we go back to the labor market and see how do we develop a pool of labor to cater for those sectors which are expanding or which are going to come on stream. And then how do we develop our education, training, and skills to be well aligned with the dynamic comparative advantage of the country. So I think the country that does this best is Singapore, but it's a very small country. It's like running a multinational company, Singapore, and makes it easier for them. But they're very good in terms of picking up what are going to be the future waves and then surfing them and getting their education and training well aligned to give them the capability to be able to move forward. In the context of increasing globalization, technological advancement, and modernizing labor markets, English literacy also has a high premium attached to it. According to the Census of Population and Housing 2012, carried out by the Department of Census and Statistics, the English literacy rate among the population above 10 years is about 31% in Sri Lanka. Of course, as we know, English literacy raises the employability and earning capacity of individuals. I think I belong to the last batch of people who also, I mean, I think it's important that our basic education is in Swabhasha, in our mother tongue. In my time, you know, we've had a lot of it done in English. I think we needed to change that. But I worked for the Commonwealth, 54 member countries, and worked on development. And I used to cite our allowing English to wane as a classic example of a public policy with a perverse outcome. I say that because originally the intention was good. The idea was to equalize opportunity across our society so that people who are from an English-speaking background didn't have an undue advantage. But actually what happened was that the people from an English-speaking background somehow managed to teach their children English. The rest of the population did not have the opportunity to learn an international language which provided them with considerable scope for upward mobility, to interact with the rest of the world. So really, I say it with a perverse outcome because it actually increased the advantage of the English-speaking people. Because as I said, their parents somehow taught their children English. So they had an international language they could use. The rest of the population, to a large extent, were deprived. I know we're changing that. I know a big effort is being made now to teach everybody an international language, and clearly English is the most widely used, so it makes sense to focus on English. But I think a couple of generations were adversely affected by what I think was a misguided policy, which in fact had the opposite effect to what it was designed to achieve. The final point I'd like to make is that according to the Census of Population and Housing in 2012, there are over 88,000 children between the ages of 5 and 19 with some level of mental and physical disability, of which 30% were not receiving any education. These statistics indicate that differently able children with severe or multiple difficulties, which preclude them from attending mainstream classrooms, abstain from receiving any form of education. This is because the public and private provision of education in this country lacks expertise and capacity to deal with such children. Therefore, these differently able children become economically handicapped once they become adults, not only because of their physical or mental disability, but also because of a lack of education that would enable them to be more economically viable. Therefore, as we foster to develop an inclusive economic development strategy in our country, recognizing every child's fundamental right for education is critical. Hence, some of you graduating today have a major role to play to provide equal opportunity to all children and to attempt to alter school culture, policies, and practices to accommodate differences in learning and physical abilities of children. With that, let me wish all of you, to congratulate all of you first, and to wish all of you the very best in the future. Thank you very much for inviting me.